Okay, so shall we start with a warm welcome and a happy new year to you all. And yes, it is the 25th of January as I'm recording this, so a month since Christmas. I hope you, well, had a restful festive break and enjoyed celebrating New Year and sort of got yourself back into the pattern. That's it, isn't it? Getting yourself back in the routine of normal life and just carrying on. I was going to say survive. We want to do more than survive this year, don't we? We want to actually be able to embrace life a little bit more. So it was a 9-week course. So if you signed up for all 9 weeks, you will have had your handouts for all the sessions. And just in case you have mislaid them, when I send out the recorded video, I will send you out the particular handout for the following week. And if you have any problems of getting hold of things or you don't understand, you're welcome to email me, or if you're a member of my Facebook group, just put a message in there. I think it does help if you put messages in the Facebook group, because it does help out other people who are coming to class who perhaps have a bit of a concern as well about the materials that I was asking you to bring. And as with all these things, I design the course in advance, and I try and find photographs that are a close match for what we're doing. And then things just change sometimes. So I would say that sometimes I can't get hold of everything that I was thinking of getting hold of. And likewise for you, when you're coming to class, don't overly stress if you haven't got that specific item. Don't let that stop you coming to class. Look at the picture, try and imagine what we're going to make and substitute what you've already got. So I don't want you to feel that you've got to go out and buy all this specialist equipment if you're just practicing at home and you think you've got something you could make do with at home. So don't stress about it too much. I've just noticed my cup of tea. Actually, it's not my cup of tea, it's in the shop, it's my little dish. I'm going to move my cup of tea out of the way. So the video doesn't show that. So I should actually, I'm seeing a message coming up. So before I got to rescue my mouse now, I ought to perhaps open up the chat box. So that is the place to ask any questions just while I am, recording. And now I've hit a button and I've done something. So let me see. I'm just going to close this one, close that one, and open the chat button. Ooh. Aha! I think I've got it right now. Suddenly, everything was disappearing. So let's get back to that. So that's the place to ask questions. And if you want to ask a question as we go along, but of course, once I've done the video recording and I stop the record button, you'll hear it go recording stopped. I will go around and we can have a face-to-face Q&A, and I'll take you off mute, or you'll need to take yourselves off mute. So no, I know some of you are on your lunch break from work, so I'll head off to you first, and then normally just make my way around the grid of photographs, and then we can have a chat. And let me know in the chat box whether you're planning to make and create with me today. Before we get into the ingredients for today's course, I am going to confuse you by talking about next week. Just do it first of all so I don't forget to tell you. Next week we're going to be making what I call a swirl of tulips, and I'm going to be using aspidistra leaves as my greenery. So you will need to buy your aspidistra leaves from your local florist. So you will need to go in and make an order. So I've actually ordered mine today, Tuesday, and as it happens, my florist gets a delivery of flowers on Friday, so I can go and collect my aspidistra leaves next Saturday or next Monday. So do make sure you give your florist at least a week's notice, otherwise you're going to be disappointed. You could, if you've got big leaves in your garden, you could substitute in, because I'm not quite sure how much my 10 leaves are going to cost me. I'm thinking it might be 10 to 15 pounds. So if that's out of your budget, see what you can substitute instead. You might want to think about forming tenax, and possibly even large laurel leaves. You'll need to do more pinning than I'm going to do, because I'm going to be using my leaves to create the swirl. And one thing you will need is a foam base to make your arrangement on. I'm getting quotes here, £20. Yes, I'm guessing. Me and guessing and money never goes well together. So I just ordered and walked out. I didn't ask how much it was going to cost you. So you can get a ballpark figure as to how much you think they're going to cost. Now, I know that some of you in the group like going, are trying to go foam free. So you will need to think a little bit laterally about how you're going to create this arrangement. It may be that you've got a metal wreath frame and you want to moss that up and then apply your tulips and your aspidistra leaves to that. But if you are, a regular at Flower Club, we all know that flower foam as a single-use plastic isn't a good idea for the environment, and we, thinking about phasing it out. But it is such a useful product, so you'll need to make your own decisions whether you're going foam-free or whether you're going to use your single-use plastic. And then you need to decide how big your flower foam frame is going to be. I think I quoted in the handout, go for a 12-inch or a 30-centimetre frame. And I would say my go-to size for things, if I'm doing bases and wreaths, is about a 12-inch, because it's a nice, regular size. It sort of has a multiple uses. You can put it on your door at that size. You can use it as a table centerpiece. Now, because I'm trying to work through my stash of flower foam, I haven't gone out to buy anything special for next week. So I'm using this flower foam wreath, which got a few pock marks in, and I do wonder whether perhaps I might have used it in its dry form at a previous class. So this one is a tiny bit smaller. This one comes up at, I think, let me measure, it's got a ruler here. It's about 24 centimetres, which will be about a 10-inch size. So what I'm going to be making is going to be smaller than what I suggested you bring with you next week. So it's entirely up to you what you do. And it may be next week, if you want to, from that picture, was probably made on an even bigger wreath than a 12-inch. It might have been a 14 or a 16. So depending on the size of your base will affect the quantity of materials that you need. So if you're going larger, you'll need more leaves. And you will see from the picture, we're pinning them around and we're doing a detail in the front. And then I'm going to be using tulips. And quite unusually, I have said, to keep your tulips out of water. So I'll probably buy my tulips at the weekend. I'll keep them in water Saturday, Sunday, water on Monday, and possibly come Monday evening, or certainly first thing Tuesday morning, I'm going to take them out of the water because I want them to bend around the shape of my wreath frame. And you can't do that if you've got turgid or the stiff stems. So you need to have a little bit of flexibility. I'm suggesting you go with one colour of tulips, again, to get that really sort of stylized look. But if you want to go multicolored, that's up to you. So when I did pop to the supermarket for my flowers I'm going to be using today, which are over my shoulder, I did notice that there were bunches of single white tulips and singles of yellow tulips, but you bet your bottom dollar when I go back there at the weekend, they won't be there. The tulips don't need to be closed. The only thing is, as the tulips open, so I'm responding to the question in the chat box, they do become slightly fragile because they get knocked. And how many petals does a tulip have? 4? And it's just if you knock one, it ends up with 3. You're going to have to turn your tulip around so the missing petal size doesn't show. I just think it's easier to work with them in, not tight bud, because you want to have some colour, but that's sort of when they're sort of about to open. So it's sort of, half to 3/4 open. But of course, the ones you buy in the supermarket will be quite tightly closed, and they've probably got very small heads compared to the type of tulips you'll find in the supermarket. And then in terms of how many bunches you need, well, it depends how many heads are in the tulip bunch that you've got at the supermarket. But you'll need to have a look at your frame, and whatever size it is, sort of imagine if you want a really heavy placement. What I normally do is notionally cut my frame in quarters and think, well, in that quarter there, how many heads do I want? 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly 5. So perhaps I'd need 20 to go all the way around there, but that is quite a lot. And remember, it's a practice session, a workshop session. And if you think, actually, I spent quite a lot of money on my aspidistra leaves, I'm just going to get one bunch of tulips and just work with the 7 or whatever that's in there, you could either distribute them evenly throughout, or you could create an area of interest and have an accent area on one side. Like all these things, setting out the best of intentions, but sometimes you just have to think on your feet a little bit. So I will move that out of the way, and let's talk about today's class. So what we're going to be making today, and those of you who follow me on Instagram and Facebook will know that I showed a picture of this base that I made at a workshop before Christmas, a few months ago. So this is what we're aiming for. This was made on a 12-inch wreath frame, but I'm going to be using a much smaller wreath frame. Mine's 8 inches. And the reason for that is I like all these techniques. The technique isn't difficult once you get the hang of it, but it's time consuming. So normally when I say to you, don't work while I'm talking. I feel like I'm a school mistress there. I normally say, watch, rest, relax, watch what I'm doing, and then get on with your making. It's quite possible that as I start making, that if you feel comfortable and you don't think you're going to miss what I'm saying, that you might want to do a little bit of making in the background. This quite possibly will be a project that is slightly more time consuming than perhaps some of the projects we've done in the past. So again, I will move that out of the way and come back to that later on. So the ingredients for today, I'm conscious that my frames don't show up. So I've chosen, these are the raised wreath frames. So if you're making a door wreath, you can buy wreath frames that are flat and they will just lie flat on the table, but these have got a slightly domed shaped edge to them. So that's one of the ingredients. You need a pair of those. I'm then going to use some packing tape, and I've decided to use, because conscious of trying to reduce my plastic and to compensate for using flour foam, I've actually bought some paper packing tape, so it's biodegradable. So I'm going to need some of that. I need an old magazine. We're going to rip pages out of the old magazine, and we're going to make lots of these straws. So all those straws around the edge of my pre-made container have all been individually made, and hence it's a little bit time consuming. So this whole bowl of straws probably took me, I don't know, a good 15 to 20 minutes to make. And I aimed for 60 as my best guess. And I'm not sure that 60 is going to be enough. So that's the time consuming bit. I've also got glue, a glue stick, because you need to glue your straws together. Now, sadly, my glue stick is so old, I discovered that it's not sticky anymore. So I actually used my hot glue gun for the sticking of my straws together. It's on my head, caught in my mouth there, which is quick. But I will say that I had to scrape hot glue off my kitchen worktop. So if you are using your hot glue for rolling, for adhering your straws together to keep that tube shape, you may want to put down a cutting mat or something, chopping board, something like that, that you can easily ping off. The irony is, I think it would have been able to ping off from my pine kitchen table, but I have made a small mess of my kitchen worktop, which probably needs a bit of white spirit over the top just to bring off the tacky glue. I've also got a ruler. I'm not going to measure it, because I'm going to use that for cutting my paper down, and a pencil. I'm not entirely sure if I mentioned a pencil on your bringing list, but hopefully you've got a pencil that is quite close at hand. So with that, oh, and raffia. So I've got rather a shocking pink raffia, which I discovered in my bag of plain raffia, but why don't I use it? If your raffia looks a little bit like this, and when we come to use it, there's a trick to getting your raffia out of the bundle. So I don't know how yours looks, but the one I buy from my wholesaler comes with a tie at the top, and I tend to replace that with an elastic band, so that as I pull my raffia off in sections, they're all a bit messy, like having knotty hair. As you pull more out, the tie that was on there originally loosens a little bit. So it just means that once you've pulled it out and you think it's getting loose, you just need to elastic band it up again to make it even tighter. And then when I pack mine away, I kind of do a little bit of a twist and a shit just to try and keep it under control. And then I've got a Hessian bag that I keep that in, so off to one side like that. So you can see it's a little bit messy. So this is a natural raffia. It may be that when you were shopping, you might have got a raffia that doesn't have all these split ends. It's a much smoother one. I think probably that's a plastic-based raffia. And the other option is, if you haven't got raffia, well, how about using some wool or something like that? So what I'm going to do now, if we've got no more questions as I start, I'm going to bring in the camera over from the side so you get an overhead view of what I'm doing. So there'll be a little bit of shuffling around as I do that, and then we can get going. What I'm going to do is, first of all, make my tube. So this might be something you might want to join in and do while I'm working. So this can be any magazine. Just move these bits out of the way. And I'm not measuring out how wide my tubes are. I'm just working with the size of my magazine, trying to keep it all really simple. So I'm going to fold, well, I'm going to fold my piece of paper in half and give it a nice firm crease and then tear it out of the magazine, or you could have torn it out of the magazine first. You just need to be, it's not difficult, but you can see if I look there, that some of my tearing out wasn't quite as accurate, so not all my pieces are firm, precise oblong shapes, but it doesn't matter at all. And then, so I ripped out about 15 pages of this originally, so a nice firm crease, and then I'm going to use my ruler to cut them up. And if you haven't got a ruler, you prefer to do it with scissors, go ahead and use scissors. So I'm getting a cut, but it's not a nice crisp cut. There was some raw edges here. And then what you would do is take your pencil and with your, let's imagine my cold glue, my glue stick works. I would probably glue up the middle like this, so that as my rollings rolled, they were all being glued up, trying to keep it straight. And then I would glue across the top and just give it a little bit of a glue and then slide the pencil out. So that's the idea. So that's going all the way along the length of the paper. What I've decided to do, and depending on the stability of your paper, I thought I can't be rolling all those up, it's going to take me forever. So I then folded my pages, I folded them in half to get these narrow strips, and I've just folded them in half again to get shorter oblongs. So this will be okay ripping the paper like this with 2 sheets of paper, but if you try and rip loads of sheets together, you're going to get loads of rippage. So don't try and do too much at once, because you're going to spoil it. And then have a look at your pieces of paper and decide which one you want to be on the outside edge. So I've got a sort of pastel bucket there and a red lady. I'm going for vaguely pastel-y colours today. So when I roll that up, I'm going to have that facing the tabletop. I've got some writing there, so I'm going to face that to the tabletop. This one, I'm going to get rid of all my reds. I'm going to have them all, I'm going to have that one that way around. So again, just have a look. Your paper is two-sided. You could just go totally random, and I think they look quite nice with black and white with print. So it just depends what you want to do. But I found the first lot of pages in my magazine were all sort of aquas and blues and whites. And I thought if I suddenly change to reds, it's going to look a little bit peculiar. So this is what I'm going to do then with my hot glue gun, is to take my pencil and roll up. You need to go, quite tight, but not so tight that you can't take pencil out at the end. And I'm trying to keep the page, the sides parallel. Never seems to quite work, but if you were going to be, you're a really careful worker, you would be able to unroll that and straighten it up. You can see I've got a deeper bit here than I have over here. But I'm amongst friends, so I'm going to just go with it. And then with my hot glue gun, I'm going to put the smallest bead I can of glue. So what happens when you put the hot glue gun on is you get a big dollop to start with, and then it does go a little bit finer. And the problem I had when I did this on my worktop, and you can see it here, that big dollop of glue, as I have sealed down the edges, it squeezes out at the edge of the paper, and that's the problem I had, because it was sticking on my my worktop. And then you just ease your pencil out, she says. Perhaps I'll go the other way like that. So you don't need me to do it again, but let's just see if I can do it slightly smoother this time, ever aiming for perfection. So rolling up, and again, if I had the glue stick, I would probably do glue across the top and glue down the middle and across the top, so it's going in a sort of elongated T shape. So again, hot glue on the end there, and you just keep making, but I can't tell you how many you need. It'll be a lot. So that might be something you decide to do in front of the telly this evening, and then slide that out. So you carry on and you carry on, and eventually you'll end up with a bowl full of them. So that's one thing that perhaps you might want to be getting on with. And then we need to prep the base. So we've got the 2 raised rings, and I'm going to put them together like that. So it looks like a sort of lamp shade. So the smaller circles at the top, the two big circles are in the middle, and the smaller circle is at the bottom. You can see that it's created this sort of straight zone in the middle, and it's got this angled sort of lozenge shape at the side. And I'm going to wrap that now with my tape. Before I start, I'm going to pull off, my tape will rip. And I'm just going to put a couple of pieces, or 2 or 3 pieces, around the edge of the frame, just to hold them. And at this point, you discover that your 2 circles of your door wreath aren't actually perfect circles, but it just stops it wobbling around a little bit. Sort of control it. So here, it's sort of missed quite a lot. If that was a circle, so if it can get eased around, just try to ease it around. Ultimately, that you won't be able to tell the difference, but just getting it to feel right in your hands. So I've used my tape there. Of course, you could use sellotape just to hold them together. So they're just functional tabs just to hold the ring together. And then I'm going to take the rest of the tape and I'm going to attach it, and I'm going to cover the whole of the wreath frame with tape. And the reason I'm doing this is because eventually we're going to cover the wreath frame with raffia. And the raffia is quite spindly and will be quite difficult to make sure you haven't got any gaps. So this is like the undercoat. If you were painting, the tape is the undercoat, and then your raffia is the top coat. So a word of warning before you start. This piece of tape is practically exactly the same size as the hole in the middle of the wreath. So if you've decided to go for a larger wreath frame, you're going to find this much easier than I'm going to find it. So I will do a little bit, and depending on time, I may finish it or I may just go halfway around. So I've just taped on together, just over the edge, and taped it on just to start me off. And I'm going round. Now what we're doing here is we're going round to cover the wreath. But again, you won't get this perfectly smooth coverage because the wreath frames, put like this, have got a bit of a shape to them. And the tape I've got is quite thick, it's not lying totally straight. You can see here it's noisy and noisy. So for ease, I might cut it to 4 pieces at a time. So just to show you that in real life, it's not difficult to do, but you're not going to get it totally smooth. And you need to be almost spiraling the tape round. Can you see it's not gone straight down, straight down. I've had to try and angle it so it actually travels around the edge of the wreath. Otherwise, you'll have your tape going in the same direction. And you can see here, I've got a little air pocket there. And I've got a bit of crinkledness there. So it's going to get covered. So yes, in an ideal world, I'd want this to be super smooth, but it's just not working out when I'm sitting here working under pressure. And in fact, it didn't work out when I was doing another sample for you, which I'll show you in a moment, when I was doing it more slowly. So you continue around. So as you can imagine, I'm not going to go all the way around because you get the idea and you want to be getting on with what you're doing, not watching me watching paint dry. So imagine that I've gone all the way around back. It's giving me a little bit of stability and it's giving me that good undercoat. And this is where my raffia comes in next. So I take my raffia, and yes, you could work with a single stem of raffia at a time, going round and round and round and round. It's going to take you ages to do that. So what I've done here from the raffia that I pulled out of the bag earlier, I'm going to take my stems. I just happen to have got 4 pieces. So see what you can work with. And I'm matching all the 4 pieces at the top just together. And then for this bit, you will need your hot glue gun or a glue that will dry, not instantly, but will hold. So if you haven't got a hot glue gun, this will just take you a little bit longer to do. So I'm going to put a dab of glue on the inside of my frame, and just remembering when we're using hot glue that the glue is hot, and this is, quite likely you're really going to hurt your fingers. And if you feel that you need to press anything in position to hold it, use your scissors rather than using your fingers. But you can see exactly what I'm going to do here, and that is to wrap it round. So you need 2 hands for this. Again, not a difficult technique. just slightly time consuming. And I'm only going to glue at the beginning and the end as I start and run out of the raffia. You don't need to be gluing it every single turn unless you feel that you're getting a bit baggy and you need a little bit of security. Now my raffia is winding itself away around my tripod. So just a little bit of care, because you do want coverage. There's a tiny little gap, as you can see, there's a tiny little gap there. So I'll go through, and you can see because my raffia is the natural raffia, it does seem to split and shred. I wouldn't worry about that for now. You can get your scissors out later and give it a trim, but I would just concentrate on getting the raffia on and doing the trimming back later. And of course, if you do decide to trim, make sure it's just the fine ends that you're trimming out and you're not actually cutting into the raffia, because of course it will all come away. So my raffia isn't all the same length, so I've got a short piece there. So I'll take my hot glue gun and just try to do the smallest of dabs, because as my glue dries, it goes slightly milky in colour. And I want the feature to be the raffia, not my hard dots of hot glue. So all the way around like that. And it gets a bit, I wouldn't get too precious about going right to the ends, because sometimes they are too fine. This is when I wish I had a friend in the sidelines to help me with the second piece. Rest assured that I'll show you how to glue on the second section, but I won't actually be doing it. I think you get the gist of what I'm doing. So I'll just show you how to finish one lot off and finish off the back. So I'm going to try and get all my fixings on the back of my wreath frame, just in case there are any gluing errors, that they are hidden a little bit. And then I'm gonna have to put this in my mouth. I'm going to hand a nice double glue here, and then dragging my raffia through there, and then continuing on. And these little strandy bits at the top, I can sort of bury underneath like that. So I hope that is clear. I'm sure it is. You just need to get on and do it, ladies. And continue on until the whole lot is finished. So you can see here I have ended up with a gap there, so I could always cover it up with my fingers or go over again with perhaps just a single strand of the raffia. So that's what you're going to end up with, is this sort of lozenge shape. It's almost like a UFO shape, but covered in raffia. So I'm going to put that to one side and then come back and show you the next step. So here's one I did earlier. So for this one, I used wool, and I quite like the effect actually, but exactly the same technique. Underneath there, if I pull it apart, you can see my brown tape and covered around the same way. And when I look at it casually, I can't see where the beginning or the end was. So that is your finished base, and it may be that perhaps you decide, you want to leave it like that. And I should have said, if you are going to put flowers in, you will need a bowl to sit in the middle. And for my 8-inch wreath, this is a ramekin. It is tiny. So you just need to just think about what you're going to put in the middle. And what you will need will be slightly smaller than you actually think you'll need. Of course, this is a really small frame. If you're working with a 12-inch, as my original one was, I'd put a casserole dish inside. In fact, the casserole dish I put in was probably about this size, probably about the 8-inch. So let's get fixing. So I will bring in my little tubes here, and we need to start gluing these on. And what I'm going to do here, if this is the top edge of the frame that's going to show, I'm going to glue my straws on the underside. And you can see here that because I didn't measure out how I went with the natural width of the magazine paper, that I get a bit of an overhang at the top and a bit of an overhang at the bottom. If your paper was narrow or your wreath was deeper, it may be that when you come to put your straws on, or if you want a bigger overhang at the top edge, you would reveal more of the straws at the top. Let me show you the one that I finished before. Can you see that the straws all stick out? So that is the right way round. but what's touching the floor here, or the desk, is the tip ends of each of those straws. So I've got straw, raffia, and then the straws at the outside edge, compared to that when it's the base sitting on the floor. So again, you've just got a little bit of a design thing to think about. So I'm not going to cut these down. It would have taken me ages to measure out the correct width. And I quite like that detail when I've got some straw beneath and some straw above. So again, if you've got a hot glue gun, this is really handy because it speeds things up a bit. I don't need to trail glue all the way down the side of my straw though, because only the middle third or so is actually going to be sticking to the bottom. But what I am going to try and do is to put my glue on the seam so that what you see is the good face of the straw. So it's a bit of guesswork really. So let's hot glue gun that. I'm trying to go straight, but I've gone wiggly, and I hold it in place. So it will hold pretty quickly. Now, at this stage, you need to just remember that your inner ring here, the circle here, is smaller than the circle from the outside of your frame. So when you come and match your straws up and you're positioning your next straw, and you think, oh, I want them to all line up at the top, you can see that if you line them all at the top, they're actually going to fall off the end of the container because it's got a three-dimensional form. So if I show you the finished one, they pretty much meet the top, but to accommodate the flaring of the wreath form, they have all got this gap. And that again is why we wrapped up with the wool, because we will see glimpses of the wall of the raffia through each of those straws. So just don't get too carried away. Just before you stick and hold, just have a think about where you're actually going to put them. And as I say, I've kept my colour palette of my straws sort of pretty even, but I'm just going to pick them out of my box, my bowl there in a random form. But they're touching at the top, but they've flared out slightly at the bottom. And then you continue going all the way round like that, trying to keep them evenly spaced, try not to knock them. And if you find your glue isn't sticking immediately, just go slowly and carefully. I've discovered that some of the straws on my finished piece have started coming off. So that's probably because I've stored it in my flower engine cupboard and I haven't been particularly careful with it. So you go round like this. So you can see that's the reason why I can't tell you exactly how many straws you need, because it depends on the closeness of your placements, the size of your ring and the bulkiness of your material, which will all affect the shape. So if I turn that round, eventually the wreath will be raised slightly off my table. It was sitting flat before, but now it's raised a few centimetres off. And that's why I've got the really tiny bowl, because it needs to sit down inside. It doesn't occupy the whole of the central circle. So I'm hoping that that gives you, again, enough of an idea of how to go with this project. It's going to take me a while to go around the edge. So I will, when we've finished, I will make and create afterwards. I'm just having a look at some of the questions that are popping up. Just bear with me a moment. Oops. Just trying to get my mouse in the right place. Yes, so the question is the one I showed you in the handout made exactly the same way? Yes, it is made exactly the same way. Apart from the straws, all those straws that I made, because I wasn't using a magazine, I was using packing paper from an online delivery. I was having to cut out my pieces of paper all the same size. So it's much easier to use a magazine, but the one I made, I cut all my pieces this long, and the ones I'm using today are half length, and I can't see any difference in terms of stability. So I would say, to save yourself rolling and cutting and ripping, I think you could afford to go with the half size length of your magazine rather than the full length of the magazine. And then when you come to do your flowers, you could either put, if you've got you know, a posy pad that would fit inside if you want to have your flower foam in there, and that slots in quite nicely. That could go straight in. What you may find though with a posy pad is the inner ring of your raffia may get a bit wet. So you might want anyway to put your posy pad into a container just to keep it, you know, watertight and secure. And I can't put this in here now because I've got a wonky container because it's got, you know, feet on that side and not on the other side. If I raise it up like that, for when you come to arrange your flowers, yes, you could put flower foam in the middle there and mock up a posy pad, or, and I'm just reaching over the side, you could go with fresh water and you could make a grid at the top of your container and arrange your flowers through. So I've got some narrow pot tape here, and I would put that over the container. You can cut it each time, but for speed, I'm going to go round and round. You could certainly, you know, put 3 pieces of individual tape across the top. I'm just going round and round like that, and then do the same going the other way, and that will just give you a little bit of a supportive grid for your flowers, so they will stay put and they won't all flop to one side. But you can see here that my container isn't very big, so consequently when I come to add my flowers, they will be really, really short. So they're only going to be, you know, this high. What I would say is don't cut them though before you've finished, because you want to decide when you've got your grid here, that's resting down there, it's sitting a little bit lower than the container. So although I said my container isn't very deep, I want to make sure my haze of flower heads is just resting above this wrapped area here. So perhaps if I just balance that up there with my glue stick, I will show you what I mean. So I will pour in my water like that. And then I've got a mixed bunch of flowers in the supermarket, which were £5. So if I wanted to come in with, now I'm going to break a rule here, see if you can spot what I'm going to do. Normally we don't put tulips and daffodils together because the tulips emit a sap, and it can shorten the life of your other flowers, but I'm going to throw caution to the winds today. So I know that if I want this to show up above the rim of the container, I'm pretty much going to have to cut all the way down, and then that will stand in like that. And of course it flops to one side because there's nothing else to support it. And the same thing, you know, perhaps I'll use that stick to measure the tube there. So I've got my measuring stick and I hold my tulip up. So my tulip here isn't very big, so a good example for next week. It's smaller than an egg. And that would go in like that. So the flowers are short, but you'll still need quite a lot of them to fill up that central area. And if you had a nice big flower, I would probably put that in first to sort of act as your anchor point, and then add in your smaller flowers around the edge. And of course, if you've got greenery, put that in as well, because it will help support your flowers, also it will bump the look out. So I will be finishing off my sticks in the make and create, and then that may well take me to the end of the class, and then I'll add my flowers in. So when I finally finished it, I will put a photograph in to go with the end of the video. So I'm going to leave it there until I will bring back the camera to me. So just to have another look, I think you're going to have to just have a constant, before you get too trigger happy with that hot glue gun. Oh, they nearly went over the edge. And I've got water now in that one. It's just to think about it. It's like the rays of the sun, but can you see, I can't slip a finger down between each one, but in theory there is a gap between each of those outer edges, because as the circle gets bigger, they splay out more like the rays of the sun. When I turn it around that way, they are, I'm trying not to show you this gap here where they fell off, they are butted head to head, and the straws are below the raffia ring and above it as well. So that is what you need to remember, that they are butted up at the bottom, but they splay out a little bit at the top. So I hope that's all clear. So when we come to the live Q&A, I am here to answer your questions. And of course, my pot is absolutely tiny, but a small pot, but I'm going to fill up the whole of that area. So some of the flowers I will have to angle in, so I can't get them all upright. It'll just look like I've got an island of flowers in my little gap there. And probably what I always like to do is to break the edge of my container, not physically break it, but I will want to bring in some of the flowers just so they drape over a little bit. So it starts to appear as a harmonious whole instead of a modern structure that happens to have some flowers plop down in the middle. So it's that blending, as if you're an artist, you've done a nice circle, and then you've dots of spring colours, and then you take the paintbrush and blend everything together. So it all I don't want to say smears, doesn't seem the right word, but so it all becomes one, really, that it's not so obvious where the ring starts and the flowers start. It'll be something over a bit like that. So I'm going to sign off now for those of you who are watching on record. So I'm looking forward to seeing what your finished pieces look like. So don't forget to tag me on Instagram. I'm at flowerstart with an underscore at the end. And put a photograph in my free Facebook group, which is Flower Start World. And if you've got any questions you want to ask about the video, you can always comment on the video that you see on YouTube, because it's a private video. No one else is going to see your comments apart from other people who have previously commented. Or if you want a more in-depth answer, ask the question over in the Facebook group, and then we can all chip in with our experience of how we coped with the project and how we adapted it to suit the materials that we had. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and then I will stop the recording, and then we can have our live Q&A.